All right. Today, I've got Dr. Andrew Muldermans, who I refer to as Dr. Andy, aka the man in Timberlands, no shirt, and joggers at the CrossFit competition we first met, aka a coach that coached with me at CrossFit Brookhaven. And today, we are going to be talking about CrossFit in general. I guess, Andy, let's maybe start with how you got into CrossFit, what your experience in CrossFit is, and kind of how that applies to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure, man. So thanks, James, for having me on first. But yeah, so I was introduced to CrossFit first back in 2010. A buddy of mine that I went to high school with, he had just started it. And so he invited me to start it there. My first workout was Fran, which was typical of you shaking your head, which is so typical.
Disgusting.
Which was so typical for a lot of people that had started CrossFit back then to do. And for those who don't know what Fran is, it's 21, 15, 9 of barbell thrusters at 95 pounds for the guys and pull-ups. I scaled that immensely. Took me 6 or 7 minutes, I think, and just wiped me out. Classic for someone's first introduction. But yeah, so immediately fell in love with it. I think 6 or 7 months after starting, I went and got my L1, started coaching immediately after that. So late 2010, I think. Dove in, took all the certs that I could, the specialty certs, which I think a lot of them are now expired or have been packaged into different modules and continuing educations. Got my L2, I think shortly after that, like an L in 2013, I think, because you had to have so many coaching hours. Interned on the seminar staff for a while, hung out in the Northeast, did a lot of trips up to Canada after that, which was cool. It was learned a lot from the staff doing that. Got my L3 in 2016, and right before I went to chiropractic school, once I got into chiropractic school, I kind of had to take a back seat as far as full-time coaching, naturally. Coached part-time. James, you and I met right as I was graduating in 2020, right at the end. It was kind of like my send-off competition, so to speak. And so I had been doing CrossFit almost 6 days a week for the entirety of, what was that, 10 years at that time. I got injured as soon as I graduated chiropractic school. So right after I met you, James, injured my back pretty bad. I'd had injuries before, but nothing like this. And so that started my journey on like, I need to find something to fill that void that I could no longer do what I loved, which was CrossFit. And so for the last 2.5 years, it's been kind of a different journey where I've tried to get back into CrossFit competing. Mm-hmm. But that's, my body just has kind of nudged me in a different direction.
Got it. What'd you do to your back?
So in my clinical diagnosis, I would probably—
your own diagnoses.
Yeah. So definitely probably disrupted fibers in my L5 disc, the lowest disc. Probably have some arthritis in my facet joints of my low back, and then pretty severely sprained my ligaments all around my tailbone. So in my own diagnosis.
Yeah. And what was the diagnosis that was given to you?
Never really got one. It was all kind of similar, just, definitely disc related, potential, just diminished disc for sure. Never had an MRI. So I don't know what soft tissue is truly involved, but I can only assume that based on my limited motion in certain segments, probably just some what's called facet atrophy, or I'm sorry, facet hypertrophy, which is where the bone growth increases just due to like wear and tear. So
okay, and so you cannot do floor scorpions? Is that what I heard?
I couldn't do them before. Definitely cannot do them now.
So
thanks for shining the light on that one for me, James.
I'm just making sure that I understand where we're talking about. You absolutely cannot roll that knee out, foot full on the ground behind your back. Makes sense. So
Absolutely not.
I guess like really when we were speaking before we got on here, we were talking about trying to figure out what's actionable to kind of sum up what CrossFit is, the benefit, the role that we feel that it plays, and what it's done in both of our lives. And I'm not in the exact same position that you are with CrossFit. I mean, I didn't have that level of interest or that level of expertise with the coaching side. I mean, literally last year I coached more than I've ever coached in CrossFit in my whole life. When we were coaching together there for a little bit. So I didn't go down that path, and I didn't really have any career-ending injury or anything like that. I did, have an AC joint, little fun problem when I was at a gym down in Peachtree City, at CrossFit South over in Athens before it closed. I also always just tried to send it and didn't really warm up or see myself in there more than twice a week, and then thought that I could just do whatever I wanted, clean and jerk, whatever, and put myself in a weird position. But I guess from the ground up, I mean, you were involved in CrossFit before it became this massive, massive mainstream thing that a lot of people are like, that are not in CrossFit say, "Oh, no one should be doing that." And everyone in CrossFit says, "This is our religion. This is exactly what we live by." And so you have it's always startling to me. I don't know about for you, when you have two bodies of people that believe the opposite things so aggressively, and they both believe that both are true so aggressively that it's dogmatic to a point that you're like, this makes me question which group of these identities do I belong to? And if they both think that they're completely right, well, one of them is wrong. Right. So, I mean, as far as you staying in CrossFit, I mean, what was it that kind of drew you to it in the beginning? And do you think that still exists in CrossFit? Do you think that they've moved away from that? I mean, I still enjoy CrossFit, right? But I mean, where do you sit on that?
Yeah, great question. So I remember when I first started, I was doing all my own programming, and I was looking up, online, or back then, I think it was a lot in magazines, different, GQ workouts. And I think I remember doing Terrell Owens TO's banded style workouts. So I bought his $99 bands, and hooked them out to my pole in my basement. So it just was this cool endeavor of, I get to work outside sometimes. It was movements that I had never really done before, certainly not for intensity, nothing was really ever for time. And I didn't have to program it. I showed up, there was a warm up already written. There was a workout already prescribed. I just had to be there. The coach, taught me and walked me through it. There were people that were doing the same thing. So the environment was cool, and definitely filled that void of what I think a lot of people are trying to find now is they're no longer in sports, whether they played high school, college, or even if it was younger, and they're looking to fill that void again. It was that for me. So as I progressed through and did, the whole coaching and all that stuff, it was great because I felt like it helped more people, because I was never the greatest of athletes. But I loved seeing that people that never had done anything before in their life, like my mom, cool, she could do this. Now, fast forward to 2023, and I look at it a little bit differently in the sense of I'm not 20 anymore when I first started. And there's people coming into the space that are now 50, 55, 60, older, right? And this isn't just specific to them, but I see them starting to do movements that are complex. You mentioned earlier, clean and jerk, snatch, some of these more compound muscle ups, even pull-ups. These people have never hung from a bar ever, if not for 20, 30, 40 years. Should they strive to maybe do those movements? Yes, but I think walking them right out of the gate, there's ways I think that we as coaches, specifically in this space of CrossFit, we can do a better job of understanding movement patterns a little bit better. We don't all need to be PhD level. I get that. But understanding that I think CrossFit has this concept of the black box. So the wider, the bigger that your box is, the more tools you have in it, the less routine, the more variety, the more people you can help. I think that we have seen this shift of seeing the sport of CrossFit, the pinnacle, the best athletes in the world are doing all these high level movements, whether it be gymnastics, whether it be, barbell weightlifting or monostructural even. And we started to bring our focus and our blinders a little bit more narrow, so that we're clean and jerking every week, we're snatching every week, we're constantly always just doing the same movement patterns over and over. And yes, they're compound and they're targeting a lot of joints. Some of these people don't necessarily need that right out of the gate. My mother, who is 64 years old, she does not need to be progressively snatching 1, 2, 3 times a week. That movement might not even be safe for her. Does that mean that she should still work on picking something up and putting it overhead? Yes. But I think that instead of just asking her to repeat that motion, we can develop some movements, other movements that help her with her tissue capacity to then progress her to potentially a larger movement such as that. And sorry, we kind of went a little bit beyond your question, but I've seen myself change my lens of, I used to think everybody should snatch. They walk in the door, I'm going to teach you to be the best snatcher. And that was my goal. I'm going to teach you to move the best you can through the movements that I believe are the ones that are going to get you the fittest. And then I started learning more through my injuries of, for example, instead of doing a pull-up, maybe you should be hanging out in bicep curls for a while, for an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Because in my view, it comes back down to what the heck the goal is, right? Like, if you're getting into CrossFit, bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, kettlebell work, hardstyle kettlebell or otherwise, flow work, calisthenics, animal flow, mace work, whatever, dude. What is the reason that you're doing that, right? Is the intention to get fit? Well, if that's the case, what does fit mean? Does it mean conditioned? Does it mean aesthetic? Does it mean that you have a body that could be closer to going on stage, but then you have the conditioning of, a powerlifter, right? Because conditioning of a powerlifter is not the same as conditioning of a CrossFit athlete, but the powerlifter are usually a whole lot stronger than CrossFit athletes, unless you're talking about the highest stages. That's a little bit different of a story. But then, again, with Olympic weightlifting, people go in there at 98 keys and throw weight that someone in CrossFit would not even deadlift. Right? They throw that kind of weight over your head, but they're not going to go out and run 5K or get on a bike and be able to hang, or get on a assault bike or have to do toes to bar and be able to hang. Right. So to me, it just feels like there's in CrossFit specifically, as far as even going back to just coaching so much and seeing that it's literally it's a cult in some senses. And I think that some of that is to push forward methodology so that we're the same across all fronts, so that you get a consistent result, right? And a consistent methodology that's interwoven between mayhem, proven, any kind of programming that's put out, even main site, but then stuff gets lost. Because my mother, just like your mother, has really no business in doing certain things like bar muscle ups. For what? The risk for injury on the stress in certain positions, and it doesn't make sense. Squat snatching, I feel the same way. Now, a dumbbell alternating snatch with lowering to your shoulder, I'm here for anyone of any age, so long as you don't have AC joint and other stuff going on. To me, that's cool. But what's the need to squat snatch at 60 years old?
Yeah, I mean, that's you're exactly right. So the whole bar muscle up thing is actually a good kind of lead in. So how many times do you see somebody doing a bar muscle up who can't do maybe one pull up, okay, or less than 5 stripped, right?
Most people that are kipping into bar muscle ups can't do more than probably 8 strict pull ups, period, unweighted body weight.
Yeah, right. And don't get, I'll probably get slack for this, but there used to be this metric I heard floated around even back in the early days of CrossFit. It was, well, in order to do a kip or a kipping pull-up, and you probably heard this as well, James, that you should be able to do 5 strict pull-ups first. Well, I originally kind of liked that to begin with when I first started coaching, because it made sense just surface level of like, okay, well, a kip has momentum to it. You can lose a lot of energy in a kip if you're not in the right positions. Okay, that was in their L1 course way back in the day, right? But if a kip is actually very hard to do while maintaining proper position and tension in your shoulder joint. Most people just are like, well, I just need to get from A to B up to C. And so that's all they really look for. So you can hide a lot with momentum. So I think there's this, we don't do enough strict work. We don't do enough tempo work, in my opinion, to really assess someone's movement. So, James, I know you pretty well. We used to talk about your squat a lot, right? Especially overhead, and just the difficulty you had with dropping into a squat snatch, right? And, you've done a lot of work on yourself as far as to improve a lot of mobility in the joints that you were, lacking range of motion. And you're in your late 20s, right? Well, what makes you different than somebody like you said, your mother, who shouldn't be squat snatching at 60 years old? Let's say you guys both squat the exact same, have the same different deficiencies in certain mobilities of certain joints. She has a vast number of years over you of latent tissue that has not run through that, has not been coursed through that range of motion. So you might be able to get away with that for a little bit longer, right? Even though it may not be safe for you, that'll catch up with you, versus your mother, she might have a shorter domain of like, oh, she's going to feel this, a day after, a week after, 2 weeks after, whereas you may feel it 6 months, a year, 2 years. And in my case, 13 years. And I think it's just that injury is a part of sport. I'm not telling you that if you do everything properly. Kelly Starrett talks about this a lot. He's like, yeah, injury is just a part of sport, being active.
Supple
right?
leopard. Let's go, baby.
Supple leopard, right? So just because somebody gets injured in your gym does not make you a bad coach. I love this whole, I have a lot of respect for people that constantly try to push the needle, constantly try to improve themselves, especially when it comes to then coaching, educating other people around them, trying to do a service. If you just think that, like you said, if you become this dogmatic coach or practitioner, your way is the best way. And we all have a little bit of an ego, but if you stay in that kind of mindset, eventually that's going to catch up to you, right? You're not going to grow. People around you aren't going to grow. And, in the worst case scenario, you're going to start seeing results dip, whether it be from injury or results, performance.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. So, I mean, in your estimation, from having so much experience in CrossFit, not only in coaching, but, at the seminar level, the intern side and all of that, and going through all of those certifications when they were pretty early. I mean, do you think that CrossFit still has the same role in society that it once did? Or do you think that we've kind of got our bearings mixed up?
I would say that CrossFit is still doing a great job of being accessible to the public. I think that's their biggest. I think that's the biggest thing that they're doing, is just their ability to reach and be accessible to so many people and change their lives for the better. I mean, hands down, you could go to the worst CrossFit gym in the world, okay? Yeah. And that's going to be better overall than you doing absolutely nothing, because at least you're moving.
So to fight apathy. Okay. Yeah, I'm following. We're fighting the couch here. It's better than the couch. Correct. The worst gym.
Correct. Right. Now I'm not endorsing that, go to those places, but I think that as humans, right, we're in this constant strive and battle to pursue optimization. And CrossFit, when it came out, it was this giant brand new thing, right? Whoa, we're going to add weightlifting, gymnastics, and monostructural stuff all together, and we're going to make this super athlete. And so anything was fair game as far as programming, and people, back when I started, things were on a whiteboard. Nothing was digital. I didn't have access to like now, Froning's programming and Proven, and up in New England, Ben Bergeron's out west, Invictus, and there's many more that I'm leaving out.
Pop Train, Mayhem, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Like that stuff didn't exist, but then too, it just didn't. That accessibility on social media wasn't out there. So I think that in having these outlets of accessibility to so much, we've tried to like pigeonhole it to, well, of all these things, what stuff works the best? So we've almost kind of, it's what I've seen, to answer your question, James. I've kind of seen this this shrinkage of diversity, almost thinking that, well, we don't need to do all this other stuff because, why do a bicep curl when I can power clean? And that's just an example, right? But if I want to get really good at CrossFit, well, you should clean on Mondays and then snatch on Tuesdays, and then Wednesdays be back squat, and Thursdays be, your active recovery day. Friday, come back in, you're going to deadlift, whatever it may be, right? I've seen us kind of like shrink this, what used to be this huge pool of, well, I can draw from all these different movements and all these different modalities and time domains, to let's exact this to like, what is Matt Frazier doing? What is Rich Froning doing? Let me do that. Newsflash, I don't know if the listeners out there know this. I'm not Matt Frazier. I'm not Rich Froning. I'm not Tia Claire Toomey, never will be. I'm me. You're James, right? So yes, we can take things from the best athletes in the world, but we're not them. And so I've seen the CrossFit, not world, but just our playground shrink, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of like anything that's not going to fit in a place to optimize the optimal to be on the path to be at the games, like Froning, like Brooke Wells, like Katrin David's daughter, like Annie Thor's daughter after a kid. Like anything that these greats aren't doing, we're not going to do because it doesn't make sense for me because I want to be there.
We're trimming the budget. We're trimming the hedges, so to speak. So those I think we were talking before this, and I was listening to a podcast, and we've seemed to like adapt our life around the gym, around our workouts. And then outside of the workouts, we do everything we can to make sure that we're ready to go for the next workout, instead of using what we do at the gym to go and express that in life.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the CrossFit methodology is something that you still do believe in, right? More blanketly applied, right? And maybe not dogmatically, right? Maybe you don't take every single thing as it is, but the methodology overall, going through these different types of movements and different types of exercise components, from the cardio implements all the way over to calisthenics, gymnastics, etc. But what you're saying is we're off the beaten path and not using the gym to better our life, but trying to use our life to better the gym.
Yeah, that last statement, sums it up real well. Exactly. Using the gym, for a better life versus using our life to be better at the gym. And I get it. Nowadays, those games athletes, this is their life. This is their livelihood, right? So yes, I understand, the best in the world need to adapt their life around their training. Yeah. But for somebody who was in the space for so long, I did that. And having been sidelined through injury and having to reassess what this all meant to me, I'm probably no different than a lot of other people out there that, I have a job that provides, my way of living. And I'm not going to be getting paid by doing fitness outside of coaching. So my priorities have shifted to that. Why is my focus around what I'm, making the workout my whole universe versus what can that workout do for me outside of the gym? Correct. Yeah.
And do you think that level of discernment is something that is held by most box owners? Do you think that level of discernment is something that's held by most people that are deep entrenched in CrossFit?
I would say I can't stereotype that. I won't. I think that I'll put it to you this way, and it doesn't have to be gym owners.
Mhm.
And this is something that I had to learn personally. It was until I went through something, I could truly never empathize another way of looking at something. So, like I said earlier, I think before, when I was trying to compete in CrossFit, and I had just regular Joe Schmo coming off the street to do classes.
Mhm.
I wanted them to do everything that I could do. Maybe they couldn't do bar muscle ups, ring muscle ups, but I wanted them to get there. Now, or say snatch, clean and jerk, these movements, right, that are pretty high demanding. So when I could no longer do some of these things, I started to realize, well, wait, I now understand that there's other things that people can do and should do other than some of these movements. And I think that what I've seen is that not just gym owners, CrossFit coaches, but just people in general, until you've kind of in your own way walked through a situation that someone else may be going through something similar or had gone through something similar, it's hard for you to understand, why can't you do this? So sometimes the best athletes in the gym are gym owners, because maybe they're able to work out more, their focus is around, the fitness world regime. So they can do, one workout, two workouts, or some other accessory work to become better. They can spend more time stretching, etc. You've seen this, James, having been a manager and a coach. I think sometimes it's hard for them to realize just how hard it is for some people just to get to the gym. Like going to the gym and just saying, hey, class is an hour. It's not just an hour. It's the commute to the gym. It's a 1 hour class, the commute home, and then it's the recovering as far as like, okay, you got to shower probably, you have to eat. You may have to take a couple minutes just to bring your heart rate back down and enter the world of, your reality outside the gym. So it's longer than just an hour. Some people have a really tough schedule that's, they're not just waiting to go to the gym and then hang around. So that's kind of a long-winded answer. I think it's just, for me, I can answer it this way. For me, I had to learn the hard way that, shoot, if I can't do all these things that I used to be able to do, there's people out there probably that can't do this. So it doesn't mean that I should force them to do this, but I need to learn other ways, adapting my thinking if I'm going to coach them. What can they do that can also be beneficial for them, that doesn't fit the traditional CrossFit model?
Got it. So more of an empathetic approach to coaching in the domain of CrossFit, understanding that, hey, I jacked up my back. I'm not going to be able to heavy back squat. So I need to be empathetic to those that maybe are 250 pounds plus at 5'5" or 5'6" that don't even have the mobility to get down that low without putting themselves at risk for injury. Like, yes, it's not a 1-to-1, but I need to empathize. I need to give them a substitute. I need to give them a scale. I need to give them something where this is achievable and approachable for them with where they're at, rather than try to force them into where we are.
100%. So great example with the back squat. So I see this a lot, and this used to be me. The points of performance in a movement, air squat, right? So just a few: keep your chest up, keep your back neutral, get your hips below 90, keep your knees over your toes, right? Well, I started learning that not everyone is congenitally made. Some people's hips are different than other people's. Some people's hips are different from themselves. They're right to left. So some people can't and should not squat below 90 degrees, right? But what do we always look for in the CrossFit gym, in the CrossFit box, is, hey, are you getting below parallel? Without any kind of cognition. And again, this is something that I had to learn. So I'm not calling anybody out here, but this is something I had to learn. You know what? If they can't squat below 90, I want them to squat to the point where they, their body allows them to, meeting all the safe expectations, and that's it. If they can improve their mobility to get lower, fantastic, we'll work on that. But if some people just can't, some people can't. Some people can go A to G, ass to grass, but that's not everyone, and that's okay. And that's okay. And that's something that I had to learn to be okay with. And and we can go down a rabbit hole with this. That might be for another episode, but yeah, that's just an example of, like you said, empathy, not putting everyone into a round peg, because not everyone's round.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you there. But I mean, we're not talking about standardization of movements being different because of what you're predisposed to, are we? We're talking about individualizing the programming for an individual for where they're at, not changing standards for competition, changing standards for that type of thing.
No, not for competitions.
Okay.
That's a whole different world.
Yeah. I don't want any words to be minced here, because saying that we should empathetically adapt to where people are, I don't want anyone to get that twisted, because immediately my head goes to, well, the standard for Noah Olson doing thrusters is not full lockout because he's got a shoulder impingement, and that's just him.
Yeah, and yeah, good point. No, it's not, right? So it's just like saying football. Let's say somebody's more predisposed to a concussion.
Mhm.
Well, don't hit that person in the head. You can't change the rules, a la Tom Brady, but you can't change the rules, right, for one person because they're a little bit more predisposed, or they can't necessarily fit a mold that we need to standardize. So yes,
Yeah.
this is more on just the average person of like, hey, we as coaches need to have empathy of everyone's built a little bit different.
Mhm.
And what's, like you said earlier, what's this person's goal? Are they going to the games?
Yeah.
Well, then we have to meet these standards.
Yeah. It sounds like you're talking about lifestyle clients, like day to day, like more of what someone would consider weekend warriors, right? What someone really, like, if you take coach away from you and I, if you take doctor from you, if you take coach from me, if you take business owner and chiropractor away from you, like, our fitness journeys outside of those are, I mean, it's kind of lifestyle. Like, we're not trying to do anything crazy, right? We're trying to live a healthier life, look a certain way. Everyone's trying to be better, but booty bone naked out here. Everyone's trying to look good in the mirror now. But if you take coach and coach away from both of us and doctor away from you, I mean, we're kind of in the same pocket of the people that we're talking about, right? Because we're not trying to go to the games.
100%. Only as a visitor.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would definitely be fun. I would enjoy that. I want to go to Wadapalooza. I wish I would have went this year.
Well, the games are going to be in Alabama, I think, in 2024?
Yeah, I think not this year. I think last year. This is the last year in Madison.
We'll have to go.
Yeah.
Whenever it's in Alabama, we'll go.
Should be a good time. So let's unpack this with CrossFit. I want to read through. I want your immediate thoughts after I read through the Fitness in 100 Words, which, for context for anybody, this is Greg Glassman, the founder of CrossFit. This is kind of methodology. This is something that's posted up as a poster in every daggum box anywhere in the US. This is like easy marketing. Here we are CrossFit. Let's read this and let's kind of unpack a few things here. Fitness in 100 words. Eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise, but not body fat. Practice and train major lifts, deadlift, clean, squat, presses, clean and jerk, and snatch. Similarly, master the basics of gymnastics. Pull-ups, dips, rope climb, push-ups, sit-ups, presses to handstand, pirouettes, flips, splits, and holds. Run, bike, swim, row, etc. hard and fast, 5 or 6 days per week. Mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. Routine is the enemy. Keep workouts short and intense. Keep workouts short and intense. Regularly learn and play new sports. Greg Glassman, CrossFit founder. Immediate thoughts.
Nostalgia. No, I mean, I think he kind of sums it up really well there. It's kind of funny, and this is going to kind of maybe be a little bit more nerdy of me, but I kind of honed in on the no sugar aspect, not because I don't think he's right. I just think that those nitpickers out there, and probably one including myself, is, sugars are in foods such as all fruits, most starches such as potatoes and rice. But I think what they're, again, me being a nerdy nitpicker, I think a lot of that is going to be what he's talking about is the processed sugar, table sugar. white processed, that we assume with diabetes. So, but after that, I love the fact that they mentioned all those movements in there: deadlifts, cleans, presses, rope climbs, all the gymnastics. And this is actually, I just thought about this as I was saying it. James, this is a question for you. When you hear deadlifts, what comes to mind for you as far as like, okay, well, I'm going to have my clients deadlift, or you're going to deadlift? Like, what pops into your head as far as what movements?
Ronnie Coleman, lightweight baby. That's what pops into my head.
Touché.
Ronnie Coleman blowing his back out, pulling 1,000 pounds. That's what comes into my head. But really, when I see deadlift, I think RDL.
2 legs or 1 leg?
2 legs.
2 legs. Okay. Are they conventionally set together, or are they split stance or wide?
No, I mean, I just immediately go to RDL unless we're talking about a CrossFit workout for whatever reason. I don't know why my head goes there, but it's like, I mean, also when you talk about squat, like, because it doesn't say front or back, I immediately jump to Bulgarians or rear elevated. Like, that's immediately where I jump. And that's maybe because I enjoy those and hate them at the same time. I don't do a lot of volume of deadlifts. I enjoy pulling off the ground. But I don't know. That's where I go with both of those.
Do you think that in most CrossFit gyms, when they see those movements, those list of movements, right? Do you think that most gyms see squat and see deadlift and primarily stick to, for deadlift, conventional sumo, for squats, back squat, front squat, overhead squat? Or do you think that because you had mentioned RDL, because I know you've been doing a bunch of those in your own programming. But do you think in most boxes, it's really those 5 different styles that they stick to?
I mean, I would say that like a lot of boxes have a pretty binary view. Like, they don't want to do unilateral offset load unless it's in a Metcon. They don't want to do a suitcase and an overhead unless it's something that's programmed from one of these big star programs, right? They don't want to do single leg deadlifts or single leg squats or anything unless it's a pistol. Like, literally, they only want to do these things that are CrossFit co-signed or CrossFit stamped. And it was very interesting having you coach at Brookhaven when I was over there, and then also getting to know kind of how you work, how you train your clients outside of patients, and then also what you follow, because there's a lot of things that not that I didn't know what they were. I was just like, I don't need to do that crap. What the heck I need to do all that for? I'm moving a deadlift with two legs, 2 hands, 2 feet, and I'm switch gripping because my grip is trash and I don't want to go pronated. And so we're living. I literally never did high volume of any kind of Bulgarians or anything else like that, or Patrick, Paulo Quinn, or any of that stuff either, until I met you. I literally didn't touch it because I was like, that's for Pilates, and I'm not a mom.
That's a different discussion, but you could be in today's day and age.
That's true.
So yeah, that was my whole thought process as a young coach was, compound was king. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I'm pretty sure it's written in some books, back squat is the king of all leg exercises, right? And, deadlift, like, you can impact your body on a much greater level, more efficient, create more power. You would say if you're ripping 225, 315, 335 off the floor for multiple reps, why would I need to go single leg? You and I have talked in the past about, you've mentioned to me when you switched to doing more single leg stuff, just how deficient one leg was over the other, and you can relate that can go into a lot of, neurological firing, memory mapping or body mapping, excuse me, or even just pure state of like physiological strength of a muscle. But when you read that 100 words of fitness over to me again, as soon as you started listing those movements off, like a whole drop-down menu of movements just dropped for me, which had never been there prior to probably these last 2.5 years. And so now when I go into a box, I love looking to see at the programming, like, okay, what's their variety look like? I think Metcons are awesome. I still do Metcons. I very much so moderate my tempo with certain movements. And I don't have the ability to give the intensity that I used to. And I respect that, but I think it's incredibly cool to dissect a deadlift, right? Instead of just doing 2 legs, conventional barbell or sumo conventional barbell, going single leg and doing RDLs, as you mentioned, maybe doing even like a split stance with a barbell, which is completely awkward and weird, but you're going to feel a difference in it, and is it going to change your range of motion? 100%. Are you doing this because, it's going to be a new standard at the CrossFit Games? No, most likely not. Okay. But when you start to tax the body different ways, from different angles, using different equipment and again, you don't need to go to some fancy school to learn all these things. You have your own gym playground on you, your own body. So I think that for me, CrossFit's opened up in the sense of I see squat, I see deadlift, I see presses, and I just kind of lavish at the what can I come up with through these movements that don't look traditional to what the CrossFit model was or is, I should say. So that's why I asked you about the deadlifts, because I wanted to see where your mind went to. And it's interesting that you went straight to RDL, probably in Bulgarians, because that's what you've kind of been diving into a whole heck of a lot, which I think is awesome. I would just love to see that on a more broad spectrum of gyms, being okay to throw that in there.
Being comfortable to program it too, not even just like, hey, we know this works, but hey, am I comfortable even coaching the cues of people that have never put their rear foot up on a bench and ever tried to squat?
Yeah,
ever.
I think there's this true, and I think that leads into something else where I've heard this before. Accessory work, right? It's kind of the stuff you do after you finish all your primary work. It's like, okay, well, you ate your steak and potatoes. Now you can just pick off the vegetables that you want, kind of thing, right? When in essence, those vegetables are going to be the things that truly bring in all the nutrients and allow you the ability to absorb and utilize, your steak and potatoes, so to speak. So doing just isolated hamstring work, right, the best you can, is going to benefit your deadlift versus just deadlifting all the time. And it's okay that if you come in, most gyms have this that I've seen, that this is where it's changed for me, James, that I've seen. When I was going up through CrossFit, it was you come in, you warm up, the coach walks you through all the warm up, you do it, and then he walks you through maybe a lift as far as technique. Maybe you lifted a little bit that day, but it was primarily technique work, and then you did the Metcon. So it was more Metcon based with a lot of coaching. Now it's kind of shifted to come in and the warm up. It's kind of important. We just want to get some blood flowing. There's no real intention to it. Okay, if I'm gonna come in that day and back squat, we're gonna warm up on the bike. If we're gonna come in and we're gonna run that day, we're gonna come in and warm up on the bike. If we're gonna come in and do like a gymnastics heavy Cindy, we're gonna warm up on the bike. It just becomes this like, there's no, it doesn't seem like there's any train of thought to how do I get this person primed for that movement of the day? So, and then they do a strength or a gymnastics strength component. So it's like an EMOM of gymnastics skill work, or it's an EMOM of some lift, right? Of one of those 5 conventional lifts that we talked about. And then they do the Metcon, which usually involves one or more of the gymnastics or the strengths that was in the lift. I see that over and over and over again. And what a great opportunity that we have to, like you said, implement some of these other modalities of these movements right into that strength thing. So, if you were to come in, James, instead of just having you deadlift, because you're already a phenomenal puller off the ground, right? I don't want to load your spine up for 15 reps over the course of, 10 minutes, doing a heavy deadlift, doing 5x3 over and over and over again, just to get minimal gains, marginal gains at that point. I'm going to test and see, you know what, James, we're going to tax the living bejesus out of your hamstrings by isolating them, right? Whether that could be from a rear-footed Bulgarian, right? Or some other isolated type movement, like a split stance type RDL, landmine, for instance. You're going to get a different stimulus. You're not going to be quite as taxed as you would be neurologically from the deadlift. And then boom, you know, you're going to be way warmed up for the workout. And then without having to load your spine up compression wise over and over again. It's just different ways. And it allows the allows the athlete to not see a plateau as quick and maybe reduce some of the injury potential, because you're constantly kind of varietizing the way that they move and the way that you're demanding that their tissues behave. And what was the thing that you read on that 100 words of fitness? You know, routine is the enemy.
Yeah. Routine, I guess, is the enemy for CrossFit. But it's interesting that when you see clean or you see squat or you see deadlift, it pulls up a drop-down menu. Your analytical brain pulls up a drop-down menu to all of the variations within those movements that you could implement. To me, it just goes to one. But I think to the majority of people that are traditionally trained in CrossFit that don't have Olympic weightlifting experience outside of CrossFit, that also didn't come from gymnastics or any of this kind of stuff, it's like, hey, you know, we got exactly what you said. We've got front squat, we've got back squat, we've got a squat clean, we've got a power clean, right? We have a push jerk or a power jerk, and we have a split jerk, right? And everything is barbell. And the deadlifts, we've got two ways to do it. But in CrossFit, we do it one way, right? And press, you have your strict, you have your push, and then you have your jerk. And that's it. That seems to be like and we're done. You know, that is literally all that is there. It's interesting that I have never walked into a CrossFit gym in my life and seen the types of stuff that you and I used to do together ever programmed. I think the first time that I saw that stuff programmed is when I put it in at CrossFit Brookhaven. I have never been to another gym where they're like, hey, we're going to do Bulgarian split squats before the workout. Hey, we're going to do landmine rows before the workout. Hey, we're going to do, you know, weighted pull-ups before, or some progression of before the workout. Not like, hey, get it in if you can at the end. Like, yeah, you need these, but we're not going to focus on it today. Like, instead, flip the script. And if you want to move heavier compounds, go for it. Post class, I think that it's interesting the way that CrossFit is kind of set up. And I think if you're optimizing for a class time for 60 minutes, it makes sense to have some strength, right? Forget all the accessories and a Metcon if you're optimizing for the time for a 60-minute session. But if you're optimizing for long-term health, longevity, like we gotta fill gaps. We can't just be breaking our CNS every day and expect to then have libido where it needs to be, have, you know, your recovery be where it needs to be, sleep not like asshole, right? And be able to come the next day and live to fight another day. I mean, it seems as though every time when people are walking in the gym, you got people that are in their 20s walking around all stoved up like they're 70, and they work out every day.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up a good point. So, and I know that you've been coaching for a while now. How many people walk in, like you said, 20, 30, you know, too young to be having these, like, I ache, this and that every single day. I mean, no other area of health and wellness is like, you ache, man, you're doing it right. You know, there's Andy Galpin, Dr. Andy Galpin. He's a genius in physiology, especially the musculoskeletal system. You know, he's been on record with his research articles that just break apart, like, well, if you're sore, that means you did enough, or you're going to get improvements. There's no empirical evidence out there. I wish there was. That would make it so much easier to measure gains as far as the relativity between how sore you are and how much production that workout really gave you. And I think there's this, you know, you mentioned it earlier with people that come in and just completely obliterate their CNS system from doing a workout, and they think, okay, they get the dopamine release, you know, they get the endorphins, and they feel good, and they are going to improve from that. But how long is that sustainable for? I mean, again, you're not doing the stuff that people that do this full time, you're not going cryotherapy, you're not getting enough sleep at night, you're probably not stretching enough, doing your mobility, eat the nutrients that you're taking in. I think that there's this big also thought process out there, certainly with me early on, was calories in, calories out, right? Well, I worked out really hard so I can go eat this piece of pizza or this brownie or this maybe not the healthiest meal, right? And vice versa. Well, I ate a lot, so now I have to go work out a lot. And it becomes this unhealthy balance of you're again revolving your health around how intense you go in a workout so that you can eat something or burn it off. But bringing it back, I think it's this normalcy where people just expect to be sore. They expect to have these little aches and they blame it on, well, I did, lift, I've been lifting and I know I shouldn't do it, but I still can, so I will. And that kind of brought me into this, like you had mentioned, doing stuff like when I was at CrossFit Brookhaven that normally wasn't, I didn't invent these things. Some things I like to think I did because I hadn't seen it before, but I'm not going to try to be that arrogant to say like, this is, brand new. It's just simple biomechanics of the body where you understand that why is a bicep curl more beneficial to the bicep growth than a pull-up? And should somebody be doing pull-ups because maybe their bicep tendon doesn't have the tissue capacity to handle that for rep after rep. And maybe they start doing that in a workout where they're already pre-fatigued from doing a bunch of minutes of work prior. And now you ask them to do kipping pull-ups under tension, under fatigue, and they don't have that capacity. All of a sudden, boom, I strained my shoulder. And they blame CrossFit, right? We blame the system where the accident happened, the injury occurred. But in reality, that's just where we need to kind of take a step back and realize like, okay, well, what is it about this person, that movement, that period in time that caused that injury? And that's where I like the simplicity of, hey, squat, deadlift, press, pull, climb, jump, swim, run, etc. For short time, for long time, go hard, go easy. I like that. It brings simplicity to it, right? It's accessible and repeatable and measurable. But this is where we can start growing. I mean, the CrossFit Games are a great example of this. Every year, the programmer, I think it's Dave Castro still, the games programmer, or now it's Adrian Bosman, but they always raise the bar. They always varietize stuff. Why don't we do that in CrossFit gyms?
Yeah. You see like completely different stuff. Pirouette, like spins, right? Freestanding handstand push-ups into pirouette turnarounds. Like the last games. It's kind of ridiculous. A couple of things though, from what you just said, I think it's interesting to blame the organization for an individual instance when you and your silly little ass decided to do something that you shouldn't have done, or a coach recommended that you shouldn't have done. And that responsibility falls on the coach that told you, yeah, you're A-okay to do that. But it also falls on you because nobody put a gun to your head and told you to try to get a muscle up. No one put a gun to your head and said you should start trying to do butterfly pull-ups before you can do 5 regular strict pull-ups. You have no business doing that from anyone that's in the know that has had a long-term relationship with CrossFit. I mean, the same way that you would not say, hey man, go ahead and set those jerk blocks, right? I know you've only jerked once in your life. Go ahead and set up those jerk blocks with 220 kilos and throw that thing overhead. Dude, are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind? That's like the same goofiness applied to both situations there. But we don't think that it's the same because there's not weight attached to it. I think that there's an interesting thing that happens here where we skirt personal responsibility, but then also I think that box owners, dare I say it, and if any of you are listening to me, good. Box owners and head coaches, y'all are afraid to program this stuff. Y'all are afraid to step out of the norm of what CrossFit is for fear of members not liking it. They're being pushed back. Your own lack of conviction in its efficacy because you don't even practice it, even though you know that you should, right? You'd be a hell of a better athlete if you did these things that you know that would make your athletes better. So why don't you? Well, because it requires more time. It requires more intention. It requires you to swallow the ego and not pretend like you know everything, and requires action. Most people, y'all are already running a gym, right? And this was me too. Already running a gym, in the gym so many hours a day. I don't want to do extra accessory work. I don't want to do extra all this nonsense and then have all my members do it. But the thing is, if you don't lead from the front, you're not leading. You're just ordering. Right? So I think that I think that CrossFit in general has got to do a better job. And this comes down to the individual because it's not the system, right? Look at Soul Sean, look at Ben Bergeron himself, look at what Proven, what Mayhem, look at the accessibility of their programming from top to bottom and the varied nature of what they put out with the people that work with them. They plug some holes, but I think Dr. Andy should not be on a track that literally says Mayhem compete if you're not trying to compete. There's a different methodology behind that, like a subset inside CrossFit that's programmed for. You don't have any business doing that.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good point too, James, is, like, let's say you and I are in our 60s someday, far off. Okay. But let's say you and I are in our 60s and we had never done this before. But we look at it, we're like, wow, yeah, they have masters at the games all the way up to 75, 80, whatever it is, hyperbolic situation, right? We walk into a gym and say to the gym owner, hey, like, saw this, on TV, we really want to give it a shot. We've never done this before. We want to go to the games. You had said, Froning or Mayhem's programming has a competitor programming. Nobody without that intention should be doing that. That's 100% true. And I think it's also, as a coach, right? Even just as a bystander, you could probably figure this out. But as a coach who's getting, you now have a client who's now under your tutelage, for you to say, you know what, that's a great goal. I think they've done away with SMART goals, at least that acronym. I don't know if that's fallen by the wayside, but
in CrossFit or in general, because that still exists. That still exists all over the place. And there's some people that are very close to you that still use them.
Gotcha. So, all right. So SMART goals, they do still exist, right? Is that we match their abilities with their expectations. So could you and I make it to the games at that point in that scenario? Sure, you never know, but the coach shouldn't put us on the track like a Froning or a Mayhem competitors programming right off the bat. You have to build into that from wherever you are. And eventually, it's just like, if you can't do a pull-up, well, I'm not going to program you a Froning competitors workout that has butterfly chest to bars in it, 50 for 5 rounds. And that's just an example. But you know what I mean? So
250 butterfly chest to bars.
So there needs to be some kind of, like, I don't want to say a screening process, because that's what fundamentals, what I called fundamentals back in the day. I think people call it on-ramp in some cases now, but that used to be what that was for. I've seen that go away, where it's like, just jump into the class and just don't die, right? If they survived, if they looked like they sweated, if they looked like they got a good workout in, then perfect. I sold the membership. They dig it. They'll be back. And I know that there's really good gym owners, coaches out there that maybe the coaches don't own the gym, and they know that if they get somebody to sign up for membership, it's good for the gym, right? Owners, you do have a priority. That's your business. That's your livelihood. Membership is what feeds you. Is what puts, food on your table for you and your family. Like, I get it, but it's got to be about the patient. It's got to be about the client. I apologize that I keep saying patient, but it's got to be about the member and their better well-being. Otherwise, if you could have 200 members, 250 members, but if they all start getting injured, having tweaks, need modifications, then it starts to becoming an overwhelming task if you always have to modify everything for them in your programming. And then you're diluting your product, because when I first started CrossFit, I think I figured out the metrics. I think I was paying something like $11 a class for how many times I was going. It was $11 a class for me. And you're basically, CrossFit prides itself on like, you're getting, personalized coaching in a class setting. So I was paying $11 an hour for personal training, essentially. Well, but everyone was doing the same thing. Now, if you have a ton of members, but each one of them need modifications due to whatever, whether it be an injury or just athletic ability, fitness capacity, well, you're diluting your worth. If I'm personal training somebody, my value is going to be far more than $11 an hour for personal training. And now I have to do that for 15, 20 people. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And you're going to get burnt out as a coach at some point, and your members are going to feel that. And so the gym in its entirety suffers. So, and I know you, James, you and I have talked about that a lot. One person cannot be one size fit all, right? You can't please everyone. Okay. That's where I fall hard. But there has to, there has to be this ability to kind of put systems in place. You're a big systems guy. I know that about you. You're a big systems guy. That's why you have a good system of like filtering what your athletes are capable of before they come into the gym, before they become part of the class. And I know it takes time, it takes effort, it does take coaching, but it made me better as a coach, maybe a hell of a better coach than when I first started. And I just don't see that anymore, because I'm a chiropractor, and it's a lot harder for me to treat somebody if I don't go through a thorough history of them with them. If I don't do a background, if I don't figure out what's going on with them, and I just lay them on the table and have to figure it out with my hands. I can palpate a subluxation and adjust it. But if I don't know anything about them, that's going to make my job a heck of a lot worse and harder.
Yeah.
So same thing as a coach. Member walks in, get to know them, get to know their background, see how they move. Ask them how this feels. Like you had mentioned, James, putting somebody underneath a 220 kilo, barbell for a split jerk, right? Yeah, you're shaking your head, right? It's, even if somebody looks good during a movement, but they come back and say, that felt awful to me, use that feedback. If you just say, well, that was good, keep doing it, you're not listening to your client.
Yeah.
And that's going to hit a wall one day.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because I am very much of the mind that everything should be consultative. On the sales side, on the membership side, on the entrance side, there should always be a consultation for me to figure out where the heck you're trying to go, where you're at right now, what has worked previously, what has not worked, how you fell off, what you really want, and when you want it by, so that I can direct you to the best area. And maybe that's not me. Maybe that's not coaching with me remote or in person. Maybe that's not our small group classes or large group or one-on-ones. Maybe that's me doing what I did the other day and referred somebody to a registered dietitian that does medical intervention nutrition because someone had their gallbladder pulled out. So like, that's out of scope for me. Can I help you with the fitness part once your nutrition is dialed in? Do I feel that I could serve that person? You bet your ass. Do I feel that I'm the best person to serve them? No, I don't. And so referred that kind of thing out. I think that, a lot of this comes back down to gym owners that are not thoroughbred gym people, owning gyms, wanting this to be a cash cow, passive income, turn and burn thing for them, then putting all of that pressure back on the coaches who are in a part-time capacity running your gym for you, right? Where there's no leadership from the top, right? And there's tons of gyms in Atlanta like this where, there's also some solid gyms where the owners are heavily involved and do great stuff. But I think that it's fascinating when you're not consultative, when you're not diagnostic, when you're not even trying to figure out what the heck someone has gone through to get here. How can you have a product or a service or put someone in a position to best be utilizing the tools that you have at your disposal? To just say, hey, everyone needs to go and smack these cleans. And like, you can't even hold a bar in the front rack because your wrists are too tight and your triceps are too tight and your lats are too tight. But you know what? We're power cleaning today. So grab that bar. Let's go. What? what? That's silly. And I think that CrossFit got it close to right with the RX and the scaled, except I will push when I open in person, I will push against that and go tier 1, tier 2, right? Or AB. And A being what would be typically RX, which has, more aggressive implements, right? Barbell, etc. And have tier 2 be same movement patterns, dumbbell, kettlebell, or body weight, right? Side by side, so that it is approachable, so that legitimately day one, someone can come in, but we are not putting someone with a barbell over their head. Day one, you can grab that 2.5 pound dumbbell. You can grab that 5 pound dumbbell. We can start there, because that, to me, getting your ass moving and getting you a sweat and getting you to feel, get you the dopamine release with the understanding that you need to progress. And we're going to start you here, I think is important. And I think that CrossFit gets it right with RX and scaled, but I think that the individual boxes get it wrong with how they push people, where they push them to.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I love your whole tier 1, tier 2, as far as just for putting someone on the track that is appropriate for them. Let me ask you this, because I've often battled with this myself, and I've seen this a lot, is gym owners kind of go back and forth with, or head coaches, whoever programs, go back and forth with this. Do you set the metric for your members low and scale up, modify up? Or do you set the bar high and then have modifications for those that cannot do that? I've seen it both ways. I don't know if I necessarily prefer one way or the other. I think that's where, I think you're exceptional at this. You're exceptional at communicating expectations and, getting someone to understand that it's written this way, but here's why. And you're able to bridge a lot of gaps through your communication abilities. So for you, do you have a preference on, hey guys, here's the workout of the day. If you're a better athlete than this, you can bump up to this level, or versus, all right, here's the metric. If you can't do this, here's the modifications below that. Which way do you, if any, do you go?
I think that I go prescribed movement patterns. So I think the movement patterns and the implements used would be the prescribed. Okay. So barbell versus kettlebell or dumbbell, right? And bar muscle up versus chest to bar, if we're just taking CrossFit in particular here, right? That would be the direction that I go. But just the same, you could have weighted Bulgarian split squat versus body weight Bulgarian split squat, right? Does it do the same thing? Well, depends on who you ask, but is it same movement pattern that we're trying to establish to work into what you're doing? Yes. For me, tier 1 would be, hey, for this Metcon, you have a barbell, right? We have this cardio implement as prescribed, as written to be tier 1. Technically speaking, it would be at the weight listed with those implements. Anything outside of that, even with those implements, but different weight, would need to be checked off as tier 2, which is fine. You can put it in the notes that you did tier 1 with modifications to weight. I am much more interested in you scaling appropriately to you. Now, tier 1 would be, hey, I have the understanding and the comfortability with these implements, but I can either do it as written, or I'm going to scale the weights. Sweet. Right? Or scale something in there. Sweet. But not the whole thing. Tier 2 would be, I need to scale the implements because I don't have my technique and standards of movement down. And therefore I'm not willing to put myself in a position to injure myself. And also I might need to scale the weights. That's fine with me. I would rather have, hey, here's the North Star, right? Here's where we're trying to go. Now you're trying to go, if you want to do everything as we're writing for the stimuli that we're writing it for, to be prescribed. But really, I want to get away from the RX and scaled, because I think tier 1, tier 2 just sounds a little bit more approachable. And it's a little bit less like you're winning or you're losing, right? It's like, no, like maybe today Andrew wants to do a tier 2 workout, right? Maybe you're feeling a little bit tired. You want to grab a dumbbell kettlebell instead of a barbell. Love it. You can jump in between. It doesn't make you better or worse, right? Today you wanted to do tier 2. Tomorrow you want to do tier 1, but there's not this external pressure on like it's scaled or RX, or it's RX or it's scaled. Like, so either you're with the top dogs or you're second in line, right? Like for me, I would much rather just say, hey, look, the tier 1 is just the implements, right? Use whatever weight you want that makes sense for what you're doing. But if we need to scale implements because we don't have the skill, or we don't have we don't have the comfortability or the safety, really more important than anything, then go tier 2. For me, I would set North Star and then pull down from there, because I'd always like you to think about pushing yourself further than you thought that you could, not going the other way around. Like, oh, I'm going to start here and then I'm just going to muster up the courage to go more. No, you're not. If you need to pull back, let's pull the reins back. That's cool. Right. But I'm not going to sit here and play, against psychology and say that, oh, because we start you here, then you're going to improve yourself. Get out of here. That's not going to happen. That's against human psychology. Literally. Counter 2. I would rather you pull back and be like, I aspire to be there and I'll get there one day. Sweet.
Yeah. So I like that. So 2 things. One was tier 1 to drop down into tier 2. You physically probably could not be able to do that movement safely, as opposed to, well, I can't do that weight. So now I got to totally change, where I'm quote unquote ranked. Mm-hmm. Like you had mentioned, well, I wasn't all ranked. I wasn't competitive. So now I'm with everybody else. Right. So I like that methodology. And then I think the other thing too, I love human psychology. So you kind of mentioned on leave it up to humans. We will do the status quo. The very rare will be like, no, I want more. So you're setting that destination of like, here's where we want to go. Here's the steps to get there. If you can't get there right now, totally great. Here's our modifications for that. So you're dangling that carrot out there. Carrots I think they're delicious, but not a lot of people do. So like dangling that Hershey.
Disgusting. Yeah. Give me the donut on the stick. Come
there
on.
You go. Yeah.
Pop the thing. Let's go.
Have that deep fried Snickers bar, which I heard those were disgusting in themselves, but that's a New York thing. Anyway, so yeah, you're enticing them to say, hey, I want you to achieve this, but it's okay if you can't do that right now. So I do like that, as opposed to just settling and then leaving it up to them to find the motivation. Do you so you'd mentioned that, when you open, so are you looking to have a similar style? Do you see a benefit with the way that CrossFit, the regular 1 hour class system has been developed, or would you change anything about that?
I think that it's just a foundational piece. I think that large group classes should be solid and should be something that you can do. And if you want to if you want to go in that direction for large group, I think that you should. I think that you should stay out of the no man's land, and classes should either be 16 to 20 or all the way down to 4 to 6. 4 to 6 would be small groups though. And if we're going to go small groups, it's more personalized programming. It's more personalized attention, and then jump down even more and go one-on-ones, right? That's personal training. I think three levels of service there to cater to what you're actually trying to do is important. I want the large group model and kind of the wedding cake built on top. So you got your group classes. Then you have, if people are like, hey, I like this, but I want more, right? I want small group. I want to prioritize strength training over just overall health and wellness. Cool. We can get into 3 sessions a week, right? Not on top of the other sessions, but instead of, in lieu of, right? Plug you into a small group of people that you can have even more camaraderie around. For me, I really like the way that CrossFit runs their classes. I do. I don't think necessarily that it needs to be every single day, hey, a heavy compound movement, bilateral, 2 hands on, 2 feet on, ready to roll like that. I think that in rolling in what we were speaking about earlier with the single leg, the offset load, kettlebell work, hard style, I think that all that stuff would be very solid to be doing to vary movement, but improve people, push people to the place that we're trying to go. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it's just not one size fit all.
Yeah, that I definitely agree. It's not one size fit all. I mean, I love I think what you're kind of describing would be overwhelming for a lot of current gyms. The way that CrossFit gyms,
to manage it, is that what you're saying? Like to be able to do it?
To be able to do it, yeah. And I'm not saying that's you, but I'm just saying that I think a lot of gyms, don't have the vision that you do, right? Because it's almost kind of this, and I hate to. I say
don't
this
qualify anything. Just say the damn thing, Andy.
Yeah.
Stop qualifying shit.
So I think that a lot of gyms, a lot of CrossFit gyms are looking for a place not of work, but a place where they can just go and hang out and chill and just, you know, and that's the goal. Honestly, if I have the goal in life, I would love to work less and play more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my happiness, a lot of it is in the gym. So I would love to just hang out, coach other people on like the fun stuff that I'm doing and educate them on that.
Yeah.
And have that be kind of my lifestyle. I think that there's just this like contentment with, well, it's good enough and it's working to an extent and it has worked for a while. So I don't need to progress this and I don't need to constantly be thinking about the evolution of not only fitness, but just people, you know, and so this is going to maybe sound a little bit off to the side, but, you know, nutrition wise, I think people have this weird concept of like, well, this has always worked for me. So this is always going to work for me. Like what you're eating, how much you're eating, that drastically changes. Who you were at 13 is different than how you are at 34, how you are, will be at 50 and 70, so on and so forth. Does that mean that you can eat junk food when you're younger and then you have to, you know, divvy it on the back end by eating all organic at the back end? No, but understand that your body's going to be going through changes because your environment, whether it be external or internal, changes as you get older. Same thing in the gym. You may not be able to do what you could do a year ago, 10 years ago, etc. Just like you don't know what you're going to be able to do 5 years into the future. It's going to be this ebb and flow where somebody 5 years from now is going to be able to do a muscle up, multiple muscle ups that they couldn't do before. Vice versa. I can no longer Olympic lift, right? Or I'll put it this way, I choose not to because of the negative effects that it has on me, right? That I could walk into the gym without even warming up and hit 85% of my maxes. Not smart, but I could. So I think there's just this, and we all go through it. You kind of get to a place and you level off because you're kind of looking for this calmness, this nice steady state where you don't have to challenge your body to change. So I love the fact that you're setting up systems where it's, you know, you have these 2 tiers of the program, but also these 3 levels of like group class, small group, and then individualized program. That's a lot of work. And I don't say that with a sigh of like, oh man, good luck. I say it as like, no, it's just a lot of work and it's going to benefit a lot of people, you know, and the results are going to prove themselves. I think that a lot of gyms can do good for a lot of people out there just doing the status quo, just doing what we talked about in their concept of the 100 words of fitness, right? Because if you ask Greg Glassman what that means now, it's probably a little bit different than what he meant it or what he thought about 15 or 16, 18 years ago when he wrote that. So he could have had a drop-down menu when he first wrote it, and that could be very minuscule now, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. You know, just like you have a different interpretation of that than I do. And that's great. That's what makes 8 billion people on this earth a benefit, because we all have different lenses that we look at the world through. Mm-hmm. I vibe with those people that constantly want to learn, that constantly want to grow, that don't necessarily want to challenge the system, but just improve it. And that can be through challenge, but that's where I have a big irritant now when I walk into a gym and I see what has been being done for the past 13 years, in my experience, all the same. I want to see stuff grow. I want to see stuff evolve. Which is something that I see, you know, you and I talked about a lot. I see you doing that.
Yeah, I think you can even look at let's take Jason Kalipa, for example, right? With NC Fit. Right? He's got a franchise now, right? He disaffiliated from CrossFit when all the Glassman stuff was happening, and he went a separate way. And now there's literally, I think, 1 or 2 of them in Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at their programming, I don't know if have you taken a look at any of it?
Not in years.
Okay. So Kalipa, in a lot of ways, right? He's taken out all of the CrossFit games stuff from CrossFit and made it NC fit. So making it more approachable where like you don't have skill work like double unders. I mean, you can do double unders as a substitute, right? If you'd like to, instead of single unders, but not having such a hyper fixation on skill movements that don't translate to general fitness for the lifestyle individual. That to me is very similar in trajectory with where I'd like to go with the tier 2, right? Legitimately just give you the stuff that matters, give you an environment where you want to kick it, where you want to hang out, where you want to do work prior to class, give you a sit down coffee area, right? With table and Wi-Fi so that it garners more community, you being up here, you being around, you bringing your friends in, you feeling welcome, you feeling like you're part of what we have going on here, give you a community that isn't rooted in stuff that I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt is filled with carcinogenic nonsense and will not lead you to a longer life. Right? Provide you a space that's not rooted in dogma, that's not rooted in religion, that's not rooted in vices, right? That are going to send you the wrong direction. In fact, if you get a little bit obsessed with what we're doing here, you're probably better off than getting a little bit obsessed with junk food or porn or alcohol or tobacco or whatever, like for me, that makes more sense. And obviously, right, it's a business. And I can tell you this, that the people that pay more pay way more attention. If I can give you areas for you to pay your commitment down to the highest level that you would like, you'll pay way more attention to it. Being this one size fit all, 185 across the board, 225 across the board, hey, just general membership, unlimited classes, no accountability, zero nutrition is not serving anybody. They might serve actually only the demographic that's you and I. That doesn't need all that extra stuff because we do that for other people. So we can do it for ourselves or have camaraderie and accountability and community with other coaches where we don't need it from a gym. But there are so many people that are not getting out of obesity, so many people that have zero activity outside of CrossFit or outside of any gym that don't prioritize water, that don't prioritize sleep, that don't eat balanced meals, that don't even eat real food. Right? They're hyper fixated on the just egg and all of the vegan, vegetarian options that are ultra processed, ultra refined. And I'm not, before everyone comes out of the woodwork and starts trying to cut apart words. I mean, I just believe that it would be better even for me if I ate less things that were ultra processed, that had, a list of ingredients and instead were just ingredients themselves. Right? If I ate more food like that, probably be in a better position. Right? Sorry, I like Haribo gummy bears.
Don't apologize for that.
you know what I mean, though? Like, I just think that there's so many people that are getting left out there. And that is literally why we run 3-pillar at TruCapacity. And I don't think you and I have spoken conceptually about doing that, but I don't think that to the extent that we do that, right? Our whole team now, because of how many people we've been fortunate enough to interact with. Like, we have a client load of like close to 60, 65, 70 right now. All 3 pillars: awesome. Fitness, nutrition, and accountability, right? So fitness, whether that be exercise for some, training for others, right? The nutrition, not only a guide on the side, education around, and then the accountability being support around the two. Like, it looks different for everybody. Maybe my mom is not even a good example of this because she does CrossFit 5 days a week and is completely fine and healthy and rocking and rolling. But for some, that's not what people need. And for me, I think that, dude, we owe it as coaches and as practitioners in the health space to find a way to serve more people and to serve them at a higher level. I truly believe that. And I think that our healthcare system is really a sick care system that profits off of a whole lot of nonsense. I'm not saying that the individuals that are on the front line or any practitioner that is the problem, right? Because it's an institution we're talking about here, and it's perpetrated over years and years and years and years, like a lot of other systems. But I just think that we have a responsibility as practitioners, regardless of where you fit into the mix, to figure it the fuck out. And stop using like we've always done it this way, or hey, this is what CrossFit says, this is what Orange Series says, this is what F45 says, this is what Extreme Weight Loss says, this is what Weight Watchers says, this is what Nutrisystem says, this is what Atkins says. And all of these people decided somewhere along the line that they were going to have a new methodology. They were going to have something that's out here that they were going to sell. They create businesses around it. Why are we not pushing back on anything if we believe it to the core in our heart that something isn't that beneficial?
I think so. One thing, I probably told you this before, but one thing that I guess had my eyes open to is that in my life, the more that I've learned, the less that I realize that I know. And nutrition is an incredibly gray area. I wholeheartedly believe that, like you said, foods that themselves are ingredients are far better than foods that have ingredients. So you go to the grocery store, you pick up a banana, you don't see a sticker with what's listed as ingredients on there. It's a banana. Now we look at that, we see potassium, most of us, but there are far more nutrients and phytochemicals in there than just potassium or vitamin C or some vitamin Bs. But it doesn't need to tell that on the husk of it. So I wholeheartedly believe that foods that come as ingredients are better than foods that have ingredients in them, albeit different diets and whatnot. I hate calling them diets because diet seems like a temporary word, and I think lifestyle is a better term that I like to use. Eating healthier shouldn't be a diet; it should be a lifestyle. But when it comes to even working out, you can pick up. I know that you love reading. You've referenced a ton of books to me, and I've referenced a few to you. Even with working out, there doesn't seem to be, hey, this one way, this one thing is the best, right? I think motion is better than non-motion. We're meant to move, right? I think there's more optimal ways to move, and there's less optimal ways to move. Now, I think if you're looking at a strictly potentially biomechanical standpoint, yes, there's better movements than others. Okay, but then that changes from person to person because, James, guess what? Your ankles move differently than mine. I mean, your appendages, your femurs are damn near twice as long as my femurs, right? So you have a shit ton weight lower to go in your squat than I do. That's going to alter a lot of mechanics, especially in your lumbar spine, maybe in your hips, right? So just because a squat is a great movement, it may not make it equal between people. And so, there's a ton of great people out there that I've read and listened to and just garnered information from. Greg Lehman, the PT up in Canada. Charles Poliquin. I think he passed away a few years ago, but he had a ton of great knowledge, and he had a lot of resources. And I think Doug Brignoli was another author and bodybuilder that I've read and researched and learned a lot of his biomechanics stuff from. Guess what? His stuff and Poliquin stuff butt heads. And that's okay, because I've learned from both of them. And I think that that's what the great thing about not only just fitness and health is, but life. There's a lot of different ways you can, move forward in it, but being open-minded enough to know that your way might not be the only way. That may not be the best way. And you had said earlier, like with your model that you're trying to create for people as far as, improving their lives, it's a great model, but it's not going to be a great fit for everyone. And you recognize that, and you don't get butthurt by it. And you're not afraid to say, you know what, I would love to accept your money, but you're going to find way better productivity from this gym down the street, this trainer over here, this other healthcare professional. And the world functions as a better place if we even microcosm it. Even our own households function at a better place if we can learn to kind of delegate things better, and not have this ego of like, well, if you're not doing my program, if you're not doing this thing that I told you to do, if you're not eating these foods, then you're not doing it right. I mean, honestly, yeah, I'll self-admit, I program for a bunch of people, and a lot of them end up doing it for a little bit, and they say it really helps. And then guess what? As soon as whatever they had an ailment before resolves, what do they stop doing? the stuff that I programmed for them. 6 months later, we're right back in the same conundrum that we were before, right? And I know you've seen that before, but and it's true, out of sight, out of mind. But I shouldn't get butthurt by that. I take that personally as in, okay, what did I do that didn't get through to them? But if I look at my own life, there's things that people try to educate me on, and then I fall short on. I do it for a little while, and then as soon as it's out of my, it's not a front priority, it slides. So it's a human thing. And I think especially having been in the fitness industry environment for over a decade and being in the healthcare profession, especially amongst chiropractors, and if there are chiropractors that are listening to this, okay, they may relate and they may be mad at me, is we are very egotistical, some of us, where my adjustment's the best, I'm the only one that can help you, etc. And damn it, I wish that was the case, but it's just not. It's just not. So yeah, man, I think that you I'll put it to you this, being both a coach and a business owner. So how do you play? I've always been curious, how do you play with that dichotomy of, okay, you need to make money, but you also really want to help this person? So how do you play with this balance of almost trying to make a sale, but knowing that sale is going to be beneficial for that person?
You do what's most beneficial for them, period, end of story. Like at the end of the day, you will make more money if you put people in better positions to succeed. And sometimes that means in the short run that you don't make as much money. For example, the last 3 weeks, I've referred out I get somewhere around 5 to 10 leads a day, cold leads from ads, right? I probably referred out 15 people in the past 7 days. Okay, 15 people. If you say 5 leads a day, $50 a day, right? Then 15, that's $150 I paid to just give recommendations to somebody else that I'll never have in my ecosystem, right? Never be in that situation with me. However, if I identify, right, you have an ethical responsibility. If you identify that you're not somebody that can actually help them, not your limiting beliefs is saying, I don't know if I can do it because I just haven't had a lot of wins. No. If you know at the core that you cannot serve them, period, they're not a fit for what you have, for what you can do, then you have an ethical obligation to not take their money. Because if you're to say that, look at even the Hippocratic Oath, right? Do no harm, right? Look at that direction. You should be leaning into that as well, whether you're a doctor or not, man. And at the end of the day, if I don't feel that I can help somebody, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I unpack it later and I realize, oops, I probably could have helped them, but I didn't think so at the time. Well, then cool, I can learn from that for the future. The thing that is in the best interest of my bottom line is by putting the goals and the trajectory and what will serve clients best at the forefront of my mind before I make any recommendations. If I know that if you pay more attention, and I know that you have a wedding in a month and a half, I'm not going to recommend that you get in group classes. I'm going to recommend that you get one-on-one with a coach who can do all your nutrition for you, who can write personalized programming for you. Your sessions are one-on-one 3 to 4 times a week, and you have ample recovery outside, and you're doing nothing else. You're not going to Orange Theory as well. You're not going to and doing all this other craziness. You're literally just coming to see us. I know that we can serve you at the highest level, one-on-one like that from here to April, and get you to goal in a way that I know that if I give you a less cheap service or a more cheap service, and I put you in a group class with 20 people, you're not going to get the personalized attention that you need to hit that goal in that time horizon. So if that's truly the goal in the time horizon, the only thing that does serve you is this. And if that's not actually the goal, well, then cool, we can talk other things. But if that is, and I know that this is the way that we can do it, because I can look back at instances where this has been very similar and I've been able to do the same thing, then I owe it to you to give you my actual recommendation and then set expectations for anything outside of that.
Do you think that CrossFit is the best way for somebody to get in shape?
How do you define in shape?
So we'll use the definition of CrossFit's fitness. So like increased work demands or workload, work capacity across broad modal time domains.
Say it one more time.
So increased work capacity across broad time and modal domains.
CrossFit as a methodology, I would say yes. The class format, the way that it's set up for 60-minute sessions 5 times a week, I would say no.
How would you, I guess, optimize the class then for, and this would be more like something applicable, you know, for myself or for other coaches. Like how would you set it up to be more optimal? To fit in that definition, I guess.
I would probably get away from, I would probably do my very best to get away from AMRAPs 100%. I'd get back into EMOMs. I'd get back to intentional work requirements, or, you know, I don't know what they call these in CrossFit really. I know that we had them. You have like a mandatory buy-in of X amount of things, and then you have time to do after, right? In my mind though, I think that running an EMOM situation, right? Or an every 2 minute or every 3 minute, using the efficiency of time to do that type of thing with a work requirement per every single interval is a better way to go than like, hey, we have 15 minutes to do an AMRAP of butterfly pull-ups, thrusters, and a 200-meter run. Like, I just don't think that that sets you up. That stimuli sets you up to actually progress without a higher risk of injury in an efficient manner, where most people don't have the work capacity to recover fast enough in those windows in between those movements to continue to keep the same intensity across the whole 12 to 18 minutes. In my mind, it makes more sense to run an EMOM style, right? Or break it up into, if we're going for hypertrophy, right? Break it up differently than you would an EMOM. If we're going for overall just maximal strength, we're talking about different there. I would say though that it would require more of a variation day to day than most gym owners and coaches are willing to give.
Yeah, that was going to kind of be my next question is most gym owners or coaches, I guess, that I've also just asked questions with has been, because, you know, the equation for power, which I might date myself with my knowledge, or whatever, but I believe it's work done over time. I think it's force times distance over time, which ends up being work over time. So it's how much can you move, you know, the heavier workload over a longer distance in a short period of time, and that's power. So, and they kind of relate like, well, with the 15-minute AMRAP, right, they'll come at you and they may say, well, my measurement, my metric for, you know, power output is, well, instead of getting 3 rounds, I got 5 rounds of, let's say, those pull-ups, the thrusters, and 200-meter run. That's an increase of power output because I moved, you know, my body, this weight over a longer distance, same period of time, right? Which ended up being more work. Because then it becomes down to this whole mindset of, well, intensity is the key. And I understand that used to be taught in the L1 seminars, is that intensity had a little star next to it. It's like intensity is king, right? And I think intensity kind of gets this, and I could be wrong, but this is just my mindset. Intensity gets this lodged and put in the corner of fast or heavy. And you know, potentially both, looking to both, right? Because if you and I are both deadlifting 300 pounds, 1 rep as fast as we could, I would bet my money that you could move that faster right now than I could. So your power up, what's that?
315.
Yeah, whatever that number is. You could deadlift anything. You could deadlift a barbell faster than I could right now. But you know, that metric of power is, okay, well, you lifted 315 off the ground to your hips faster than I deadlifted 315 off the ground to the hips. So like you got more of a workout, or a more productive workout, because the intensity was better, the power output was better. Where I could challenge that with, you had mentioned tempo work, I could challenge that by slowing a movement down causing a longer, and I know this is a fancy buzz phrase, time under tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by challenging your system differently, it puts a different stress on you. The intensity, I don't know how to measure that outside of the power equation, but which would end up be showing less power, I would assume. But the intensity of that, like let's say I had you squat down for 10 seconds with 225 on your back, hold for 10 seconds at the bottom, and then stand 10 seconds, take 10 seconds to do the concentric on the way up. Your heart rate's probably
225. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I could see the beads of sweat going across your forehead. Like I wouldn't want to do that. That'd be nuts because your heart rate would be shooting through the roof. You would probably, your breathing would be altered. Mm-hmm. So these systems would be kind of, it would be intense on your body, so to speak, right? So, but that would be different than me being, all right, James, give me 10 squats at 225 with no parameters of time.
Smooth, easy.
Smooth,
one
easy.
set. Unbroken. Let's go. Fast.
Yeah, right. So there's, I think, is one better than the other? I'm not going to go there, but I think that it's beneficial to do both. And I think I think in CrossFit, we've lost that. We've lost that thinking because in the 100 Words of Fitness, it mentions, you know what? It says short and fast. And that's a balloon term.
Yeah. Keep workout short and intense.
Yeah. Keep it short and intense. Right. And so 30 seconds, 1 rep, that's 30 seconds is short, correct? Mm-hmm. In a relatively, thought out period of time. But you were like, heck no, give me 10 reps as fast as I can. So much easier.
Yeah.
You could probably, it would probably be maybe the same time frame, a little bit longer with the 10 squats, right? But I can change up that stimulus short period of time. I don't know why we've gotten away from that.
Well, I think it's because I think it's a little bit silly to look at like a barbell or a 315 deadlift off the ground to your hips as being intensity. That's work, right? Because it's force times displacement, right? Which is power, not intensity. Like intensity and power are not the same thing.
True.
So like if we're gonna say power is work over time, then power is also force times displacement over time. Physics, like from a physics perspective, if we're talking about that. So I think it's interesting that I think that this is the crux of a lot of situations in health and wellness and in practitioners communicating cross-disciplinary, where people don't even know the definitions of the words they're throwing around, and we're confusing the hell out of everyone. People can't agree what the hell a carbohydrate is, or what the hell process means, or what the hell any of these, like, people are using words flippantly, using language like technical jargon or terminology flippantly, right? Without regard to what the hell it actually means, and without an understanding and an agreement by all parties what definition we're using for this term, we can't speak about it, right? I believe that Socrates is the one that said that wisdom starts with the definition of terms. Right?
I can't
I'm
verify
sure
that or confirm it, but you've told me that before, so I'm going to go with it.
Let's see if I'm a liar.
What does Google say? I can quote Hippocrates as far as the Hippocratic Oath, but also like food being thy medicine, medicine being thy food.
Yeah.
Socrates he's another animal that I haven't dug into as much.
Yeah, it looks like. Yeah, I mean that's who's commonly quoted for that. The beginning of wisdom is wisdom starts by defining terms. Is just essentially like just rough translation there. Yeah. Alex Hormozi has quoted that a handful of times as well. But what's interesting to me about that is, like, if we don't define what power is, how the heck can we talk about it? If we don't define what intensity is, or displacement, or work, or delta T, right? Elapsed time. Like if we don't actually break down what those are, how can we have an actual discussion? Because we may be disagreeing on the same things and not realizing it.
Or disagreeing on different things.
Yes. And having two different conversations and be like, well, I think intensity is da, da, da. And you're like, got it. Well, that's actually intensity, and what I'm talking about is power, but we're confusing or we're conflating the two, and we think they're both intensity. So that's very interesting, but I think that that's a crux. That's literally something that I find so frustrating when we're talking about different modalities of training. And then also, when we're talking about interdisciplinary interactions with chiropractors, PTs, RDs, MDs, DOs, etc. Like, dude, we use terms that on our chest actually have us looking different and put us in a place where somebody else in one of these other disciplines that's supposed to be holistically helping individuals doesn't understand and doesn't use in their day-to-day. So you can talk about, and I'll use chiropractors, I'll pick on you because you're sitting in front of me, subluxation. How many times outside of an orthopedic or a chiropractor does anyone say subluxation? I have never in my whole life, outside of Nathan Teeter, who's a DPT, ever heard anyone outside of a chiropractor say that ever. Subluxation. What?
And I'll be honest too, James, is that even within the chiropractic community, with chiropractors, there's confusion with that word. Now, not everyone. I think I should say within the schools, different schools have different ways that they define subluxation. Now, we won't go into all like the definition of that, okay? Because as far as just having a misaligned joint impacting the nervous system, that's as far as I'll go into that, okay? But for sure, like we have outside of the gym as patients come in all the time with reports from various imaging, such as MRIs, CTs, ultrasounds. And the one thing that I truly love is walking through that terminology that another health professional, most often it's either their primary care or an orthopedic surgeon that has written the report, or a DO has written the report, and then they've never had it walked through, sat down and explained to them, the patient has. So I love doing that because there are certain terms that definitely cross each profession. And so if somebody comes in with a diagnosis that they've gotten from somebody else, another healthcare professional, and let's just say they say, I have degenerative joint disease, right? To them, they're now labeled as that. Well, I have this, so I just don't want you to touch that. Or I have this, almost giving us this, I have this just to make sure that you're aware that my doctor doesn't want you to evaluate that because we've already had that diagnosed. But when I explain through what they mean by this and what on the report they're referring to as to why they were labeled as now having this disease, which it is not a disease, it's a dis-ease. But when they have an understanding of what that actually entails, their pupils dilate, you can see the gears turning inside their head, that they now connect the dots. Oh, that's why I have shoulder pain. That's why my knee hurts. That's why my low back is this. That's why I haven't been able to bend over and pick up my daughter, etc. So you're 100% right with this misunderstanding of, thinking of it. Like if I was to argue with them about them having this degenerative joint disease, instead of explaining what I meant or what I know of it, and said like, well, no, you're wrong. You don't have this, or here's what I'm talking about. Automatically defensive mode. So like if you and I discuss, hey, I'm talking about intensity, you're talking about power, and we don't come to the conclusion of like, oh, we're talking about two different things, and we just keep arguing and building our own defenses, you're going to walk away being like, that guy's an asshole and an idiot, he knows nothing, right? And vice versa. And how many times has that happened in a gym setting where you just automatically, as soon as you have that opposition and you feel threatened with your knowledge and authority, yeah, right? Fists go up, yeah, right? Yeah, fists go up, and you just, everything after that, it's almost like when somebody says, hey, you're great, but nothing before a but ever matters. Everything
like
after
your
that
qualifiers, like you need to stop qualifying, doc. Hey, I just so that before, but
Touche. And that's why you're a brother of mine, because you call me on my stuff. That's why I keep you close.
Yeah. Can I also call you out on you having 2 pop filters on your mic? I think I said that last time. So that outside pop filter that you were just adjusting right on your microphone, this is just me digging at your actual mic setup. You have one of those on your microphone too. I don't know if you see it. You got 2 foam things. You got a foam thing on your microphone.
Yeah.
You don't need that. You don't need this if you have one on here. I don't. So I have this.
Yeah. I can take that off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
For sure. Yeah, it gets in the way too. I can't see your chin. Right. I have no chin. You have no chin. Here we are, no chin.
If I was to shave, you would definitely see a chin. That's why I keep it. That's why I keep the beard.
Yeah, boom. Now we can see your whole damn face. I love it.
There we go. People don't want to see this face.
Yeah. So that foam on top of there, it's a pop filter. It stops the S's, the hisses, the spits, and all that stuff. And now you can get that way closer to your face without it jacking up anything.
Perfect.
Heck yeah.
There we go.
Oh, there it is.
How we sound?
Easy. Yeah, it sounds the same, except for now I can see your face and you're not like this.
Maybe I was doing that on purpose.
I know you get nervous, but I didn't think you got that nervous.
Goodness. No, not with you. Not with you.
Hope not. Well, this is a hell of a long conversation for us to be talking about CrossFit now at 1 hour and 51 minutes.
And didn't we? Yeah, we had said we got to keep
let's
it under
go
2 hours.
Short, dude. Let's go short for these. No, nothing short about this. But I appreciate it, and we will be doing this a whole lot more. So anyone that's listening, we're probably going to cut there on CrossFit, but anyone that's listening, we're going to be getting together and chopping up on a ton of things more consistently. Maybe from some discipline on the side of chiropractic, on coaching, on health, wellness, on all kinds of things. Anything that we're both curious about communicating on, and hope this provided value. And if it didn't, well, don't listen next time, I guess. But if it did, share with your friend, and we'll be solid to go from there. I appreciate you being here, Andy.
Yeah, James, man, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We will see y'all next time.